Good afternoon. I'm Natalie Marmy, and General Hospital will be seen at a later time. Right now, we're bringing you the latest and breaking news in the disappearance of Brooke Wilberger. We now know police believe Brooke was murdered, and police believe a man currently sitting in an Albuquerque jail was the one who killed her.
We are at a milestone in this case in that on Friday, July 29th, last Friday, the Benton County Grand Jury reviewed this case, the case of Brooke Wilberger.
Missing person posters are being taken down for Brooke Wilberger. More than 5 years after she disappeared, police in Oregon have finally located the remains of the 19-year-old college student.
Brooke Wilberger was 19 years old, living in Oregon, and she came from a big, close-knit family. She was the fifth of 6 kids. Growing up in a house that was always loud and full of people, she learned early on how to pay attention, how to read a room, and how to really notice others. She did well in school and was one of those kids people had high expectations for. She was also seriously athletic. She loved basketball, was really into snowboarding, and went running a lot. Movement was kind of her way to release stress and stay focused, you know? When Brooke was 16, she started dating one of her oldest childhood friends, Justin, someone she'd known for years and trusted completely. They were both deeply devoted members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and faith played a huge role in their lives. So, when Justin left for a 2-year church mission, it wasn't really seen as a breakup or a loss, more like a stage they just had to get through. Around that same time, Brooke enrolled at Brigham Young University in Utah, and honestly, that choice wasn't random at all. As a child, Brooke had struggled significantly with speech. She didn't start talking until she was 4 years old, and that experience stayed with her in a very real way. One of the biggest reasons she chose BYU was because it had one of the strongest speech pathology programs out there, and for her, that mattered on a personal level. That's exactly what she wanted to do with her life, help people overcome speech difficulties like the ones she had faced herself, and help them regain confidence. Her family often said that even though Brooke spoke softly and calmly, she never held back if she believed something or someone was wrong. She had this mix of humility and a strong inner moral compass. Over time, she outgrew her small community and felt this growing pull to see more of the world, to step beyond what was familiar. So when college came around, she was ready emotionally, mentally, all of it. Her first year went smoothly, no major issues, and it left her feeling like she'd made the right call. After finishing her first year, like a lot of college students, Brooke came back home for the summer. She wanted to earn some money for the upcoming school year so she wouldn't have to rely on her parents. Her sister, Stephanie, helped her land a job at Oak Park Apartments in Corvallis, about 30 miles from their parents' house. Stephanie didn't just live there, she and her husband actually managed the complex, so she knew the area and the people really well. For Brooke, it felt like the perfect setup, a safe, familiar summer job that still left room for a social life. She planned to stay with Stephanie for a few days at a time, work her shifts, and spend the rest of her time catching up with friends, visiting people she knew, and enjoying that short break between school years. At that point, her life felt organized, balanced, and full of plans, exactly how life is supposed to feel when you're 19 years old, like everything is still ahead of you. It was the start of the week, a warm Monday morning in Corvallis, Oregon, just a normal, quiet day that gave absolutely no hint that anything was wrong. The air felt calm, unhurried, and everything around them looked ordinary and familiar. Stephanie and Brooke had planned to have lunch together that day. Between Brooke's work shifts, just a simple plan, part of their regular routine. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, Stephanie glanced out the window and saw Brooke filling a bucket with water, getting ready to wash the outdoor light fixtures around the complex. It was just a typical work moment, one of those everyday scenes that doesn't raise any red flags or spark any concern. Hours passed. Stephanie stayed busy with household chores, making lunch for her kids and for her sister, thinking about normal, everyday stuff, not really noticing how fast time was slipping by. Then she happened to look at the clock. It was already well past 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Brooke still hadn't come back. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal, a delay that could easily be explained by work, or by stopping to talk with one of the residents. Stephanie later said she grabbed the kids and, trying not to show how worried she was, joked with them, saying, "All right, let's go on a little search." She walked around the buildings, scanning all the familiar spots in the complex, assuming Brooke had either gotten caught up talking to someone or had just lost track of time while working. Each minute started to feel longer than the one before. And that's when her eyes landed on something that instantly knocked the breath out of her. The buckets of water Brooke had filled earlier, along with her cleaning supplies, were sitting near the closest light pole. Everything looked abandoned, like the job had been stopped suddenly, right in the middle. The plastic strap between the toes was torn, and the sandals themselves were dirty and twisted. According to Stephanie, it looked like Brooke had been forcibly pulled out of them, like she'd tried to hold her ground and resist. That uneasy feeling quickly turned into real fear. Stephanie called her husband, and the two of them searched together for a while, walking the property over and over, hoping to spot Brooke somewhere. But with every passing minute, it became more and more clear something was seriously wrong. When they realized that Brooke's phone, her purse, and her wallet were all still inside her locked car, any remaining doubt disappeared. This wasn't just her running late. It was after 3 o'clock in the afternoon when they finally knew it was time to call 911. That warm, ordinary Monday had completely lost its normal feel, turning into the beginning of a nightmare that could no longer be ignored.
911, what's your emergency? Yeah, I've got someone who's missing, a worker of mine that I can't seem to find. Missing from where? I'm the manager of the Oak Park Apartments, and this worker actually happens to be my sister-in-law. She's 19. When was the last time anybody saw her? Around 10:30.
Police were just as concerned as Stephanie. From the very first hours, it was obvious this disappearance didn't follow the usual script. It just didn't feel normal. You know, something about it stood out right away. Like this wasn't a situation where you simply wait and see what happens. Lieutenant Ron Noble was very direct about that and said, "Adults can come and go whenever they want, you know, and normally we wait to see if the person shows up maybe later that day or even the next day. But in this case, that just wasn't enough." Instinct lined up with the facts. It was obvious Brooke wasn't the kind of person who would just disappear without telling anyone where she was going. She was responsible, predictable, and always kept her family in the loop. That's why every small detail from that morning mattered so much. Several residents of the complex reported hearing a scream. Around 10:30 in the morning, a woman's scream, sharp, brief, and deeply unsettling. But no one actually saw anything. No eyewitnesses. Just a sound that faded into the normal background noise of the day. Within hours, news of Brooke's disappearance spread at a terrifying speed. While some investigators went door to door, methodically speaking with every resident, checking alibis and routines, others focused on a much darker path. They began reviewing registered sex offenders in the area, and with roughly 2,000 individuals on that list, it was a massive, almost overwhelming task. Every name mattered. Every address had to be checked. Of course, police also wanted to speak with Brooke's boyfriend, Justin, but he was about as far away as someone could possibly be. His mission was in Venezuela, and everyone could confirm he had been there the entire time, with no physical way to be involved. Justin talked about the future. He talked about marriage. Brooke had always told him she dreamed of having a big family, lots of kids. For him, Brooke's disappearance felt unreal, like something that just didn't make sense on any level. He couldn't wrap his head around the idea that this was now his reality. After speaking with him, investigators ruled him out almost immediately. Police Captain Jonathan Sassamon later said the atmosphere was incredibly tense. The community wanted answers. And the community was scared. Is there someone else out there? Who's going to be next? Those questions were spoken out loud and whispered behind closed doors, in homes and on the streets. Brooke's case quickly became one of the most high-profile cases in Oregon's history. Hundreds of people joined the search: volunteers, students, families. Even the Federal Bureau of Investigation got involved. Tips came in from everywhere. People claimed they had seen someone who looked like Brooke across Oregon and even beyond state lines. Every call was checked. Every bit of hope faded almost as quickly as it appeared. A few days later, investigators received a tip about a man named Sunu Kim, and he soon became a person of interest. Kim was a very withdrawn 30-year-old man who lived about 80 miles from Corvallis with his parents. Police became aware of him after learning he had been stealing women's underwear from college dorms and was later charged with burglary. One of the dorm rooms he targeted was at Oregon State University, literally just steps away from Oak Park Apartments. That connection raised alarms. When police searched his home, they found thousands upon thousands of pairs of women's underwear, a scale that shocked even seasoned detectives. Investigators believed behavior like that could easily escalate into something far more dangerous. Just before sunrise, nearly a week after Brooke vanished, police raided Kim's home. The search only deepened their concern. On his computer, they found tens of thousands of sexual images and videos, many depicting rape, torture, and mutilation. On the desktop, They also discovered a file titled OSU.doc, short for Oregon State University. It had been created after Brooke disappeared, and what was inside was deeply disturbing. It was essentially a step-by-step guide on how to commit a sexual crime and avoid getting caught, including advice on clothing, behavior, and what to bring along. But despite how horrifying the findings were, nothing in that file directly linked Kim to Brooke. And even though the lead felt serious and terrifying, Kim was eventually ruled out. Data from his computer and phone, along with store receipts, confirmed that at the time Brooke disappeared, he was at home and shopping with his father. Kim later served 7 years in prison on multiple charges, including burglary. His parents filed a lawsuit against authorities over how officers stormed their home that morning, calling it excessive and traumatizing. The case was settled for a little over $300,000. Meanwhile, in Brooke's case, days turned into weeks. Then a month passed, still no sign of the 19-year-old woman. And with every passing day, hope faded. Statistically, the chances of finding Brooke alive were dropping fast, and that reality weighed heavily on everyone involved. Investigators did have information about a vehicle that kept coming up. They were looking for a dark green minivan, possibly a 1997 model. They also reached out to a man named Brian, who had previously called 911 to report a vehicle matching that description driving dangerously fast. Detectives received multiple reports of what was believed to be the same minivan near Oregon State University on the day Brooke disappeared. A university employee named Bob said he saw the minivan with Minnesota license plates in a parking lot. He watched as the driver spoke to a female student, and she was so frightened that she immediately reported the encounter to campus staff. Another student shared a similar experience. A vehicle pulled up in front of her, and the man inside asked for directions. She quickly walked away the moment he got out of the car and opened the back door. These were promising leads, but figuring out who exactly was in that vehicle and whether they were even connected to Brooke's case still felt painfully far away. Then came 6 agonizing months with no answers. Search teams slowly disbanded. Media attention faded. For most people, life went on. Finally, in November, more than 1,400 miles away, in Albuquerque, officers received a call that had far too much in common with Brooke's case to ignore. A woman named Dara was driving with her daughters when they saw a young woman running down a main road, completely naked, hysterical. She was screaming, panicking, and then ran toward a restaurant, desperately trying to get the door open. Dara didn't hesitate. She stopped and pulled the woman into her car without a second thought. The woman was a 22-year-old exchange student from Russia. Shaking and in tears, she said she had been walking down the street when someone grabbed her from behind and pressed a knife to her throat. A tall, stocky white man with a shaved head and a beard dragged her into his car, sexually assaulted her, then tied her up using her own shoelaces. After that, he drove into an apartment complex and got out, heading into one of the units. Somehow, unbelievably, she managed to free herself. Without thinking, she ran for her life. Dara called 911 and gave a detailed description of the man and his very distinctive car, a 2-door red vehicle with red floral upholstery and a stuffed toy hanging near the window. Very quickly, police had a name: Joel Patrick Courtney, a married father of 3 who lived with his family in the suburbs of Albuquerque. They found him just a few blocks away. He was sitting in his car with a crack pipe and a knife. Joel was already a convicted sex offender back in 1991. He had served time for sexual assault and had a long criminal record stretching over the years. At 38, Joel had spent most of his adult life drifting, working odd jobs. He'd been everywhere from Alaska to Florida, New Mexico, and Oregon. Joel's wife, Rosie, had recently filed a restraining order after he strangled her. His sister, Denna, later said that as a child, he tested at a genius-level IQ and seemed full of potential. But by 11, he started using drugs, which only escalated over time. He never finished school and was repeatedly sent to juvenile detention for various offenses, including a sexual assault he committed at 18. Denna also said that he would come into her room at night, choke her, and try to rape her. For a while, things seemed calmer when Joel met Rosie at 23 and they had children together. Despite everything she endured, Rosie chose to forgive him and tried to keep building a life with him. But a few years later, he spiraled again back to drugs and alcohol, and things grew much, much darker. At the time of his arrest, Joel was drinking heavily, smoking crack cocaine regularly, and racking up DUI arrests. He was quickly charged with the rape, kidnapping, and assault of the 22-year-old exchange student. And during interrogations, one observant detective couldn't ignore the similarities to Brooke's case, which was still active and heavily covered by the media thousands of miles away. Brooke and the other student looked strikingly similar. and the method of abduction was almost identical. The detective called the department handling Brooke's case to ask whether they were familiar with Joel. It turned out that on the day Brooke disappeared, Joel had been in the same area with his family. And when Rosie called Joel's sister, Dina, to tell her about his arrest, her thoughts went down the exact same path as law enforcement's. After Dana joined the call, she turned to her husband and said,
Do you think he could have been involved in that too? I mean, it's almost impossible to even wrap your head around the idea that something like that could be true.
She fell silent, thinking about the missing 19-year-old girl. Dana later admitted that she couldn't bring herself to say it out loud, but deep down, her intuition kept telling her the same thing he knew where Brooke was.
Good afternoon. I'm Natalie Marmion. General Hospital will be seen at a later time. Right now, we're bringing you the latest in breaking news in the disappearance of Brooke Wilberger. We now know police believe Brooke was murdered, and police believe a man currently sitting in an Albuquerque jail was the one who killed her.
Even though Brooke's body was never found, investigators had very little doubt she was officially considered deceased. It was a heavy decision, but an unavoidable one, driven by the circumstances of the case and the cold logic of the investigation. And while Joel sat in a cell, cut off from the outside world, detectives spent months, step by step, building the case against him. The work was slow, exhausting, with no dramatic breakthroughs, just this constant feeling that the truth was close. When law enforcement finally located the vehicle Joel had been using at the time, a lot of pieces suddenly fell into place. It was a dark green minivan, the same vehicle witnesses had reported again and again, the same minivan seen in the area, drawing attention because of its behavior and resurfacing repeatedly in different accounts. Forensic teams went over it with extreme care. The minivan was taken apart down to bare metal panels removed, upholstery stripped, seats and floor mats pulled out. Every inch was examined, every surface tested. They were looking for traces that could remain even after thorough cleaning. The process took a long time and demanded patience. Months of waiting followed as lab results slowly came back. And when those results finally arrived, there was no room left for doubt. In the spring of 2005, Brooke's DNA was confirmed inside the vehicle. That was the turning point. On top of that, in one of Joel's bags, investigators found her light-colored hair tied together with a hair elastic. A small, ordinary item that suddenly became a silent but undeniable piece of evidence. The DNA analysis led to one more devastating conclusion. It was determined that Brooke had been raped. That fact permanently changed the tone of the case, turning what had once been assumptions into a harsh, unavoidable reality. What had previously felt like a terrifying possibility was now scientifically confirmed, and there was no going back.
We are at a milestone in this case in that on Friday, July 29th, last Friday, the Benton County Grand Jury reviewed this case, the case of Brooke Wilberger. The grand jury, after hearing all of the evidence, returned a 19-count indictment accusing Joel Patrick Courtney, who's 39 years old, of 14 counts of aggravated murder alleged in alternative theories, 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping in the first degree, 1 count of first-degree rape, 1 count of first-degree sexual abuse, and 1 count of first-degree sodomy. Under Oregon law, the maximum possible penalty for aggravated murder is death. With charges pending in New Mexico, however, it is unlikely that he'll be available for extradition to Oregon for some time. So don't expect to see the defendant before an Oregon court in the next few days or the next few weeks. As you know, the defendant was arrested November 29th of last year in Albuquerque on similar but unrelated charges in their jurisdiction involving the abduction and sodomization of a college-age student there in New Mexico. The huge difference between that case and our case is that the victim in New Mexico was able to escape and survive the attack and report it to the police.
Eventually, Joel Patrick Courtney was charged with 19 counts, including aggravated murder, kidnapping, sodomy, and rape. Even for seasoned prosecutors, the list of charges was staggering. This wasn't a single count or a single incident, it was a full picture of violence, systematic and deliberate. A prosecutor later pointed out a detail that shocked many people. When Joel was shown the official documents listing the charges, he spent that afternoon laughing about them with other inmates, acting like this wasn't real life and like the destroyed fate of a 19-year-old girl meant nothing at all. even though Joel continued to firmly deny that he had ever even heard Brooke's name, let alone had anything to do with her disappearance or death. One private conversation revealed his true attitude. When his mother came to visit him and looked him straight in the eyes, asking directly whether he had killed her, he didn't answer right away. He paused. A long, heavy pause. Then, coldly and confidently, he said, "They're never going to hold me accountable for this." Those words didn't sound emotional. They sounded like certainty, like the belief of someone who thought he would slip away again, just like he had before. In January of 2007, despite Joel's repeated claims that his mental state supposedly made him unfit to stand trial in Brooke's case, the court ruled otherwise. After evaluations and hearings, he was found mentally competent and capable of facing trial. That decision became a turning point in the case. Brooke's mother, Cammie, later recalled that she was driving when she heard the news. She said she literally danced in her seat from relief and joy. Only then did she realize how close she had come to falling into complete darkness, that black hole of despair that would have opened if Joel had managed to avoid trial on technical grounds. But the path to accountability wasn't over yet. Before he could stand trial for the crimes against Brooke, Joel first had to answer for the attack on the woman in New Mexico. Only after that would the real fight for justice in Brooke's case truly begin.
A Rio Rancho man who faces a murder charge in a highly publicized Oregon case has been sentenced to 18 years in prison for kidnapping and raping a University of New Mexico foreign exchange student back in 2004.
Eventually, Joel pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 18 years for kidnapping and rape. During sentencing, he continued to behave arrogantly in the courtroom and showed open contempt toward the judge, saying,
"No respect for this court. You're the rudest person I've ever met. I would spit in your face if I was close enough. Don't even start."
Police later admitted that the more he revealed who he really was, the stronger their anger and determination became. Every statement he made, every act of open disrespect, only reinforced investigators' belief that he knew the truth. They were convinced that sooner or later, he would say where Brooke was, and they would find her no matter the cost, no matter how hard it would be. 5 years had passed since Brooke was last seen. 5 years of uncertainty, pain, and questions with no answers. By early 2010, Joel was set to stand trial. He was facing the death penalty, and prosecutors made it clear they were willing to make a deal if it meant learning where Brooke's remains were. For her family, this wasn't just a legal move, it was the only chance to finally get some form of closure. For months, Joel refused to cooperate. He stalled, manipulated, and seemed to enjoy controlling the situation, playing games with everyone: investigators, prosecutors, and the victim's family. He knew exactly what he was holding over them. But gradually, the conditions of his confinement began to change. After several particularly brutal beatings by other inmates and his inability to get the anxiety medication he needed, his confidence started to crack. The system he thought he could exploit began turning against him. For years, he had used his knowledge of where Brooke was as a weapon. It was his only source of power, the silence he held over everyone until he decided it was time to trade it for something, and eventually, he laid out his terms. Joel said he wanted to serve the remainder of his 18-year sentence in New Mexico, closer to his family, and then be transferred to Oregon afterward. He also demanded that the death penalty be taken off the table. It was a difficult deal, but for investigators and Brooke's family, it was the only way forward. Everyone agreed. After that, Joel changed his stance. He admitted guilt and, for the first time in 5 years, agreed to cooperate. Finally, he promised to give Brooke's family what they had begged for, waited for, and prayed for all those long years: the chance to find her and bring an end to the unbearable uncertainty.
Missing person posters are being taken down for Brooke Wilberger. More than 5 years after she disappeared, police in Oregon have finally located the remains of the 19-year-old college student.
Oregon's Attorney General is in Eugene for several reasons, but he spent the day tackling questions about the Wilberger case. John Kroger says he applauds the work done by the Benton County District Attorney's Office. Oregon's AG is pleased with the outcome, getting Joel Courtney to give up Wilberger's remains as part of the plea deal. He also believes the DA's office handled the case well, especially since the case came with a lot of public scrutiny.
I think it was very important not only to make sure that he serves a life sentence without any chance of release, but also to make sure that the remains of the victim were found. I think that was extraordinarily important.
Near an abandoned road, about 12 miles west of where Brooke was abducted, her remains were finally found. He had hidden her body on private property, concealing it beneath a fallen tree. Dental records were used for identification, and her mother also identified her. She immediately recognized the silver watch Brooke was wearing, the same one she had given her for Christmas. Cammie remembered gifting it to her daughter so clearly. Brooke's family, always showing dignity and inner strength, said they felt gratitude even toward Joel. Cammie said,
"We're grateful that justice has been served and that he will never have any chance at parole. Now he can live out whatever is left of his life."
In court, Joel finally confessed to what he had done. His words came out cold and detached, with no remorse, like he was telling someone else's story. He said that on that fatal day, he had been driving around the area with no specific destination, deliberately looking for a young woman. He also admitted that before encountering Brooke, he had tried to abduct 2 other university students. Those were the same women who had earlier come forward and told police what happened. Each of those incidents led to additional charges against him. But according to him, everything changed the moment he saw Brooke. She was alone, focused on her work, busy with ordinary, everyday tasks. That, he claimed, is what made him change his approach. He pretended to be a delivery driver, trying to look harmless and gain her trust. When Brooke came closer to the van, he acted fast. Threatening her with a knife, he abducted her, dragged her into the vehicle, tied her up with tape, and began sexually assaulting her. After that, he drove her out of town to a wooded area, far from anyone else. In the darkness, among the trees, with no way to escape or call for help. Later, he beat her to death. The words were spoken in the courtroom flatly, almost without emotion, but the weight of them was unbearable. Joel claimed that he hadn't even thought about killing her until he saw how desperately Brooke fought back. He said he was surprised by how strong she was, how fiercely she resisted, how hard she fought for her life. By his own account, that resistance became the turning point. He also said that he hid her body in a way that made it unlikely it would ever be found. The location was chosen deliberately, the method carefully thought out, and if he hadn't revealed it himself, the truth might have stayed hidden forever. That statement became yet another reminder of how long he controlled the situation, holding on to the final answer everyone had been waiting for years.
Not much has been disclosed in the Wilberger case about where the crime actually took place. Authorities say it happened in the woods in Benton County in Coastal Range. And for the people who live in that area, they say they can't believe something like this could have happened in their backyard.
This is a real, nice community, and, bad stuff, it just never happens out here. It just doesn't.
It's kind of eerie that he went in, he could have been in here, he could have been in here the next day, the day before.
Mark Scacco owns the Blodgett Country Store, which is about 3 miles from where he thinks the crime was committed. He says he's surprised it could have happened so close to home.
Some of us actually did search that area because it's a little abandoned road. And nobody seen anything. So, if something wants to be hidden, it can be hidden very well.
But the news about Wilberger hasn't changed their attitude about Blodgett.
We love it here, and we just are so sorry that this happened, but it doesn't change our feeling about the community.
And no one worries there's anything else hidden in these woods.
I'm not going to pick up my bags and leave. This is my hometown, and anywhere you go, it can happen.
He never apologized to her family and showed no signs of sympathy or remorse. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Joel's sister, Denna, said,
From the very first hint of a possible connection, our family stood firm in the belief that even though we loved Joel, our first responsibility was to God. And we were prepared to do whatever it took to uncover the truth and fully understand what really happened. Our very first prayer, starting on November 30th, 2004, was this: Heavenly Father, if Joel is responsible for this, please let him tell the truth. And please allow Brooke to be found. When I learned that the truth had finally come out and that Brooke's body had been found, I cried. The emotions were incredibly mixed, but I am deeply grateful that the Wilberger family was able to get the resolution they had been so desperately searching for.
Although it was never definitively proven, the FBI believed he could have been a serial killer, identifying 3 additional possible victims in Oregon whom Joel had likely sexually assaulted and murdered. A prosecutor said that in her entire career, she had only encountered one other person who gave her the same icy sense of terror, someone just as evil, and that was the serial killer Richard Ramirez. Brooke went from washing outdoor light poles and waiting to have lunch with her sister to an absolute nightmare in just a matter of minutes. A normal work morning, simple plans for the day, and that basic sense of safety all vanished instantly, leaving behind a void that could never be filled. What started as an ordinary routine was cut short suddenly and brutally, with no warning at all. Her sister, Stephanie, said,
I could live to be 80 years old, live a whole lifetime, and I still don't think I'll ever be able to think about what happened to her and be at peace with it. Time will never make this acceptable.
There was no exaggeration in her words, just exhaustion and a kind of pain that doesn't fade with time. She added that she can't stop thinking about that day, but at the same time, she deeply hopes to reach a point where she no longer replays that morning from 2004 over and over in her head. Every movement, every decision, she constantly asks herself what she could have changed. If she could have changed anything at all, it's a closed, draining loop of thoughts, with no way out, one that still gives her no peace even years later. Cammie said that grief will always be deeper than anyone can imagine, especially for those looking at this story from the outside. We often compare it to an iceberg in our family, she said. What the public sees is like what's above the surface, maybe shocking, maybe devastating, but it's nothing compared to what's happening underneath. She explained that the real pain is buried deep, beneath the daily effort to keep living, to work, to smile, and to exist in a world that, for them, has been permanently changed. It's a kind of pain that doesn't go away and doesn't dull with time, it just becomes part of life. You know? If you'd like to support our channel and help us keep creating content, please don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, share it, and subscribe. It genuinely helps us more than you might think and allows us to keep telling these difficult, heavy, but important stories.